Good day, students. In this audio lecture, I will be discussing Sir Roger de Coverley, or the de Coverley Papers, as they are popularly known as the de Coverley Papers. Now, we have particularly two essays in our syllabus, and that is Sir Roger at Home and Sir Roger at Church. Previously, I have already shared with you the original text, that is the essays, and I have also sent or uploaded certain materials regarding the essays, introductions, and the context, that is the time during which the essays were being written, the historical background, and whatever was happening in Europe at that point of time during the 18th century, during the 1700s. Um, Now, in the series of lectures that will be following series of lectures, I will be discussing a few analytical points, and I will be summarizing the essays and giving you certain more useful information. Now, since I have received no questions or no queries or any kind of suggestions from your end, I would assume that you are not having any problem in reading through the essays or in understanding it. So I will just consider these series of lectures as a continuation of the materials that I have shared. So today let us begin with a brief summary of the essay Sir Roger at Sir Roger at Home. Now, the essay Sir Roger at Home shows us how the author, that is, the author of the Spectator, we are talking about the author of the Spectator over here. Uh, this was this has already been discussed or written exhaustively in the materials that I have said. How Joseph Addison and Addison and Steele developed the Spectator. It was a periodical which carried the essays of Joseph Addison and Richard Steele simultaneously, sometimes one after the other, one followed by the other. So, this particular essay, that is Sir Roger at Home, it shows how the author, that is the author of the Spectator or Addison, who is actually the Spectator is Joseph Addison. This also you must be familiar with. I'm sorry. You must also be familiar with this particular fact. The spectator is Addison and Steele, who are observing the world around them, and they are providing certain commentaries on what they observe, on their inferences. They are drawing conclusions and they are writing it. So, Sir Roger is basically fundamentally and quite evidently, if Addison is the spectator and Addison is writing about Sir Roger, then Sir Roger becomes the representative character type or personality type of that period of time in England. So, in this essay, we see how the author was invited to stay at the country house of Sir Roger. The paper narrates the story of how he spent his days while being there. The essay is a part of the Coverley paper, of course, that Addison and Steele were writing or wrote. It shows the character of being Sir Roger being an overwhelming mixture of humanity, hospitality, love, disappointment, honesty, goodness, and even superstition. Now, these are the qualities of Sir Roger, that summarized qualities of Sir Roger. But what we must notice is this particular word, that all of these qualities that are mentioned over here, mixture of humanity, hospitality, love, disappointment, honesty, goodness, and even superstition. All of these qualities, they are present in Sir Roger, but in an overwhelming mixture. So there is no balance of the qualities that you see in front of you within Sir Roger. They are in quantities more than what he can manage, and that is what provides us with the anecdotes, or which provides us with the uh, humorous undertone that the essay has. The satirists that is Steele and Addison, the two creators of the character of Sir Roger, tried to show the oddities and the vices. I'm sorry, the oddities and the vices of 18th century English society through Sir Roger. So, in that case, Sir Roger becomes a representative character type of the 18th century English society. He is beloved by all his staffs, he is loved by his staff, his, the people who work for him. Everyone wanting to be employed by him, everyone wants Sir Roger to employ them, and he does. He complies them, he satisfies them, and he employs these people. His staffs, they have worked for him for a really, really long time. The author had been invited to Sir Roger to his country house, and when he went there, he himself got to experience the hospitality and graciousness of his host. He saw that all the servants liked and loved their master, with most of them working here for more than a decade. So we can see that the servants, they have a kind of loyalty to Sir Roger, since they have worked for him for decades. They like him. They have grown a familiar bond with their master. The author Addison was allowed to do anything he wanted to do in the house. There were no restrictions. He was treated perfectly as a guest. And Sir Roger had already told his servants not to disturb Addison, for he knows he loved being alone. The author also mentions uh, that the respect and love for the servants was such that if their master coughed or simply showed any signs of being old, they would start worrying about him with tension. Now, this is quite interesting, and this is also very out of place if you think of it in our context. You will find that this is not the real case. This is not what happens with us or around us in general. We see Addison mentioning that the servants love him so much, the servants love their master so much, that even if there are very little signs of him showing illness such as cold, they would start worrying about him, and they would get stressed out. Now, this shows a kind of love and the deep bond that the servants share with their master. And in the hands of uh, even though he is presented as a kind, generous, lovable, and sometimes a peculiar person, in the hands of Addison and Steele, that is the spectator or the writers of these essays, so Roger's character is conveyed ironically. He is presented ironically by the writers, by Addison and Steele. For that reason, he seems sometimes odd, even when he is put in context of the 18th century. All these things are mentioned or explained superbly in his essays. Sir Roger is a man of humanity and has a large heart, we can see from the essays. Moreover, he is mild. He's not very uh, he does not get very angry. He's not short tempered. He's mild. He loves not only the servants of his house, but also the people who live around. In the essay Sir Roger at Church, that he is asking we see that he is asking about the condition of the people who are absent in the church. Now, this suggests that he is very kind-hearted and generous, who is very aware of the other people who are around him, is not selfish at all. Sir Roger at home, we see that he is loved by his servants, as I mentioned right now, who are living with him, and they are growing older with him like family people. They are like members of the same family because of their love towards Sir Roger, that is. Now, Addison makes a comment in the essay Sir Roger at Home. He says that I am more at ease in Sir Roger's family because he consists of sober and staid persons. For as the knight is the best master in the world, he seldom changes his servants, and he is beloved by all about him. This is what he says. So, like a very apt observer or able observer, a person who observes and then only makes conclusion or comes to conclusion and makes certain comments. The spectator, that is Addison in this case, he says that he is more at ease in Sir Roger's family. More at ease in comparison to what? To his own home. Because it consists of sober and staid, that is stable persons. For as the knight is the best master in the world, here we have a comparison, an explicit comparison of Sir Roger with a knight. And in a similar way, as the knight is the master of the world, Sir Roger is also master of his servants, and he seldom changes them, and he is beloved by all about him. So what used to happen in the yesterdays was that a knight used to have his squire and whom he used to train, training with the possibility that the squire would also turn out or become a knight in the future. And as such, you do not see the teacher, that is the knight, and the student, that is the squire, ever separating from each other until and unless there are some irreconcilable feud that happens between them. So they carry out their relationship for a lifetime, even if they are not together. So this is a situation in Sir Roger's home that Addison feels is similarly characterized, that as a knight never changes his servants or those who work for him, as a knight is a servant of the master in his world. Sir Roger also seldom changes his servants, and he is loved by all of them. uh, Sir Roger is also a lover of religion. um, Sir Roger is also a true lover of religion. He is a regular churchgoer, and encourages others to come to the church as well. His mind is set for religious purposes, and he does a lot of jobs for religion. So, in the essay, Sir Roger at Church, we see that he has decorated and beautified the church on his own accord, uh, at his own initiative, and at his own expenses, so that the country people would be encouraged to come to the church with enthusiasm. And in the essay, he says, so in the essay, Addison says that my friend Sir Roger, being a good churchman, has beautified the inside of his church with several texts of his own choosing. He has likewise given a handsome pulpit cloth and railed in the communion table at his own expense. Now, this shows a kind of submission, or this shows a kind of relationship with religion that Sir Roger has, which he also wants to share with other people of his community. Sir Roger is also known for another characteristic, and that is his hospitality. After getting invitation from Sir Roger, the author, that is Addison, went to his country house. Here his hospitality takes the attention of the readers. Here we see that he's very hospitable and does everything possible to make his friend, that is Addison, happy. Even the people around his house were requested not to get close to Addison because Addison would be disturbed. In his house, Addison was requested to feel free for any kind of job. Sir Roger has also a certain kind of authoritative power. So authority is another characteristic that we find in this character of Sir Roger. He has authoritative power both in home and the church. In the church, we see that he keeps his authoritative power. In the essay, Sir Roger at Church, Addison writes the following. He says that as Sir Roger As Sir Roger is landlord to the whole congregation, he keeps them in good order and will suffer nobody to sleep in it. Even if he sees anybody nodding, that is somebody who has come to the church and is nodding off while the sermon is being given, whether it is in the middle of the congregation, that is the sermon, or not, he walks to that person or sends his servants to him and makes him alert, wakes him up. Moreover, he appoints the clergymen of the church on his own account and expense and suggests them to follow the instructions of different professors for sermons. So he is diligent. His service towards religion is not just for show, but he takes great efforts to maintain the kind of faith that he has for religion as well, and he wants other people to show the same. Sir Roger is also a very skilled organizer. He organizes not only the house but also the church. He has keen sense to organize things. The church is organized beautifully. He encourages people to come to church. He decorates for church and keeps the church in a very good and disciplined order. All these things he suggests that he is a skilled organizer, and Addison writes that he often told me, that is, he's talking about Sir Roger, he often told me that at his coming to the estate, I'm sorry, just that at his coming to the estate, he found his parishioners very irregular, and that in order to make them kneel and join in his responses, he gave every one of them a hassock and a common prayer book. So he takes initiative in the workings of the church himself and asks his parishioners, that is, the people who are joining the community of the church, that uh, they be as diligent as that they not continue to be regular, and gives them a common prayer book, the Bible, that is. He is also a very responsible person, Sir Roger. That is, Sir Roger is a very responsible person. Being the landlord of all his congregations, he felt personally responsible for their behavior and exerted his authority to keep them disciplined. He uses his authority to keep them disciplined. He allows no one to sleep during the congregation, as we said. If he fell asleep during the sermon, on waking up, he would look around, and if he found anyone dozing off, he would immediately wake him up. Even in the middle of the congregation, he would stand up and start counting the number of people to understand anybody's absence. And therefore, Addison writes, just one moment. Addison writes that he has, I'm sorry, it is, and Addison writes that sometimes he stands up when everybody else is upon their knees to count the congregation or see if any of his tenants are missing. Sir Roger is an eccentric character. Eccentric. He's, to some extent, he can be considered to be eccentric. In almost all of the essays regarding him, in almost all of the Sir Roger the Coverley papers, we find its full expression. In the essay Sir Roger at Church, his eccentricity is seen, in which he exercises his authority. He wants that his tenants should behave well in church. They must not sleep, make any noise during the service, but he himself does so. Sometimes, when everybody was on their knees, he stands up. So you see that there is the irony that is presented via the character of Sir Roger. Is it that Sir Roger, even though he wants or wills everybody else around him to perform or to conduct themselves in a certain kind of way, to be disciplined, to be regular, to be aware and alert. He himself does not show those qualities. He stands up while everybody is kneeling to see if everybody is sleeping, even though he himself sleeps off sometimes during the sermon. So he is presented ironically, the character type that he is, that he wants to have authority over everybody else, but does not possess the qualities which he wants to see in everybody else around him. Sir Roger is also a humorist, like Addison or like the Spectator himself. In most of the De Coverley essays, we find humorous expressions. His eccentricities cannot make us, they can only make us laugh. The ways that he adopts to do his daily work are sometimes humorous. Sometimes he follies, and sometimes his eccentricities are expressed in a very humorous fashion in the De Coverley papers. In Sir Roger at Home, in Sir Roger at Home, Addison says, or Addison writes, Addison writes that I have observed in several of my papers that my friend Sir Roger, amidst all his good qualities, is something of a humorist. Addison sees a kind of reflection of his own qualities in Sir Roger. That is precisely because he wants this quality of himself, that is, of being a humorist, to be retained within the character type of Sir Roger. Because as a spectator, you must understand that if you are a spectator to some event, taking and in this case, as Addison is, who is physically participating in that event, that is the event of Sir Roger at church or Sir Roger at home, or in his country house, or in the garden, as so many of his essays are titled. So if you are a spectator in an event in which you are participating, you cannot remain as a spectator only, you become a part of that event. And if you are a part of that event, in this case Addison also sees himself to be a character type that he was himself portraying in the De Coverley papers. He could not escape the characterization of the 18th century as he saw around himself. He was also a part of that society in context, and as such, he wanted those reflections and the manner in which he was portraying, or the customs and the rituals and the behavioral patterns among the people of the 18th century, and reflects them within the character of Sir Roger. He also reflects a certain kind of him, a certain part of him within the character of Sir Roger. Sir Roger is a mirror of himself, of Addison himself, and the society in which he was writing, in which he was living. So it can be said that in spite of being a man of great honor, Sir Roger is regarded as a humorist and sometimes eccentric because of him having some oddities or peculiarities in him. However, the ultimate aim of Addison was not to show his humorous expressions to make us laugh only, rather to make up rather to make us correct our own follies and absurdities. As art mirrors the society, this is also a cathartic effect, if you can say like that, that you would see something happening on the stage and then not want that same thing to happen to you, because you carry a lesson from what you see. And after you have witnessed Sir Roger, or after you have witnessed the various activities of the De Coverley papers, you do not want to repeat those same events again. You do not want to see yourself as a person like Sir Roger. So while showing the eccentricities, the idiosyncrasies, the oddities, the peculiarities that Sir Roger has, Addison wants us to consciously avoid being that type, and hence he uses humor, hence he uses irony in order to perfectly carry out the sketch of Sir Roger in front of us. let us talk about a bit. Let us talk a bit about humor in the essays of Addison. It is, as I have mentioned already, it is chiefly ironical. Sorry, it is ironical and satirical. Satirical and ironical humor. Humor and irony are related very closely in his essays. Most of the time, it is seen where humor is expressed. He expresses it ironically. Moreover, his laughter is intended to mend, as I just mentioned, it is intended to correct and rectify the follies and the absurdities that he shows in an ironical fashion. Irony in his essays is one of the best weapons of satire, and it is a chief ingredient of humor, as we have seen in the works of Alexander Pope, and to some extent in the works of Swift, uh, and of course we have Addison and Steele. Now, called A critic called W.J. or William James Porthop says that the essence of Addison's humor is irony, but he is more concerned with instructions and reforms than with pure entertainment. So his humor is aimed towards critiquing and instructive. They are instructive and reformative rather than entertaining. He attacks the vices of men, follies, which are found in his own speech. And as such, he says, and in order to maintain this technique, that is to create a character who is only symbolic and has no physical existence, he sometimes praises the character outwardly, but inwardly, these praises they become ironic, satiric, and humorous as well. However, Sir Roger de Coverley essays, considering its subject and matter, can be called an eulogy of Sir Roger. Now, what is this? What is eulogy first? Eulogy is when you speak highly of someone or something, and it is an eulogy of Sir Roger. But as we go deep and read it critically, we must find humoristic expressions of Addison about Sir Roger, and Sir Roger is criticized ironically in many times. Addison shows that through Sir Roger, though Sir Roger is lovable and an honorable man, he has his comic side, and everything is delineated or explained very sharply in his essays. But the irony in De Coverley essays is not in the least offensive or hurtful. The oddities and the eccentricities of Sir Roger, they are ironically conveyed to us. But we laugh at Sir Roger's absurd behavior at the assize at church. We also develop feelings of respect and love for him because of his humanity, charity, and generosity. Ridicule by means of irony is combined with wit and respect in the portrayal of Sir Roger. Humor is abound in Sir Roger at Church, in the essay Sir Roger at Church. Here, most of the time, humor is expressed in the form of irony. The follies, oddities of Sir Roger are the chief elements of humor. His authoritative power sometimes leads him to become a funny man. Addison shows that Sir Roger is eccentric to some extent, and we find full expression of it in this essay. Uh, he exercises authority in an eccentric manner. He wanted his tenants should behave well in church, allows nobody to sleep. He gets up when they are on his knees. Sometimes stands up when, as I said, sometimes stands up when everybody's kneeling. As he's the landlord, he doesn't care about anybody. It creates humor, and we laugh at his peculiarities, and Addison presents these things ironically. Then again, Addison says about Sir Roger that when he is pleased with a matter, he pronounces the word Amen for several times. Addison says, half a minute after the rest of the congregation have done with it. Sometimes, when he is pleased with a matter of his devotion, he pronounces Amen 3 or 4 times to the same prayer. People generally do not do any job during the time of congregation, but sometimes Sir Roger gets falls asleep during the time, and if by chance he sees anybody else is dozing, he wakes him up or sends his servants to him. These eccentricities make us laugh. But even when he leaves the church first after finishing the congregation, and no one dares leave the room before him, he goes out dividing the people into two rows, and he follows the channel between these two rows. These jobs of Sir Roger are humorous. Apparently, Addison tries to amuse the reader through these humorous expressions, but actually he satirizes the vices of Sir Roger, as sleeping in the church during sermons is a humiliation to the Christianity, to the church affairs. In Sir Roger at Home, in that essay also, after getting invitation from Sir Roger, Addison goes to the country house. His village people went to see Addison, but Sir Roger refused them because he thought that they would disturb Addison. So he forbids the country people not to get closer to Addison. And again, the Spectator says, Addison says that as I have been walking in his fields, I have observed them stealing a sight over me over a hedge, that is the village people, and I've heard the knight desiring them, the knight as in Sir Roger, desiring them not to let them see me, for that I hated to be stared at. So this is not something that Addison himself wants, but it is Sir Roger who wants this. This forbidding of the villagers to see Addison, because it is his own village that he has returned to. This forbidding act is humorous. Moreover, in this particular essay, that is Sir Roger at Home, we are met with the character called Chaplain. Chaplain is a character, and who the character of Chaplain. Chaplain lives within the family rather as a relation than a dependent. Chaplain is not a family member of Sir Roger. And even though Sir Roger is keeping Chaplain with him in his house, Chaplain does not behave like a dependent. Somebody is dependent on Sir Roger and his family for food and shelter and whatever else, but as a relation. He's like a family member. Chaplain has great proficiency in Latin and Greek. Besides, he was a good preacher possessing a clear voice. In brief, he was a good person both intellectually and morally. But his master, that is Sir Roger, so he knew this Latin and Greek, was proficient in it, but his master, Sir Roger, was afraid of being insulted with Latin and Greek in his own table, because of the obvious reason that Sir Roger himself does not know these languages. Now, this is a kind of satiric representation of Sir Roger, that Sir Roger, even though he is charitable, humanitarian, mild, well mannered, eccentric, authoritative, some qualities that are all good, the way that he is presented is the way that he presents himself rather, or behaves, is quite ironic, because if you are supporting somebody who is good or proficient in Greek and Latin, or in any other job or work for the matter, then you cannot be insulted by that very by that very act, by that very good quality that the other person possesses. You cannot be insulted by that very quality because you do not possess it yourself. Now that is hypocritical, and this is what Addison wants us to understand. Then again, Sir Roger gives a suggestion to the clergyman to be instructed by the books of other professors. Other professors, some of their names are available. Other, prof- Other professors such as Saint Asaph, Dr. South, etc. It is also humorous because it is not the proper way to develop clergyman's creative faculties. A clergyman who is new to the church, new to the congregation, and wants to give a sermon on his own, will choose his own part of the Bible to have to say in the sermon the next day. He cannot be cornered around or dealt like that with anybody, and in this case, it is Sir Roger. So, if you want to build your creativity as a preacher, interpret the Bible in order to teach the congregation, teach those who attend your sermon. It depends upon the clergy, it depends upon the father to interpret the Bible. So if Sir Roger is coming to him and asking him to prepare the sermon in a certain way by referring to these other people, other professors of religion, then it is a kind of imposition, it is a kind of manipulation that Sir Roger himself maybe does not realize. And the readers of the time still more did not realize very seriously, because all of it is presented in an ironical and humorous sort of a way, because this is the means that Addison chose to instruct rather than writing like Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon's essays are completely opposite to what Addison and Steele were writing. They were didactic essays, essays that are written specifically for the purpose of instruction, for the purpose of moral and educational instruction, and nothing else. Whereas on the other hand, these essays, that is the Coverley papers and the essays that Addison and Steele were writing at that point of time, even though they had the purpose of instructing the readers, they did not want to do it in a didactic fashion, but in a more freer, in a more liberal, in a more interpretative, ironical, satirical, and humorous fashion. That is the difference. So undoubtedly, we can say that Addison's essays are abound with humor, and humor is expressed in the form of irony mostly. But the works and attitudes of Sir Roger Addison expresses these humors. But his ultimate aim is not to make the readers laugh, as I said, but to correct us and the readers within, and instruct the readers within the society. The assessor Roger at Church highly acutely satirizes his dealings, Sir Roger's dealings with the church, and the Spectator, that is Addison, says that as Sir Roger is landlord to the whole congregation, he keeps them in very good order and will suffer nobody to sleep in it besides himself. This last part is essential. Besides himself. That is a certain kind of corruption, which of course you can understand. The squire routinely causes disruptions within the essay. That is, the character of the squire routinely causes disruptions, such as lengthening the verses, makes the verses of the psalms in the sermon longer. He stands while others are kneeling. The squire, that is Sir Roger, stands while others are kneeling. Mr. Spectator, that is Addison, gives a suggestion, or gives his opinion that the worthiness of his character made these behavioral oddities seem like foils rather than blemishes of his good qualities. Now, these were foils, as in it made him separate from all the else within that essay, from all the other characters in the essay. Addison also notes that none of the other parishioners were polite or educated enough to recognize the ridiculousness of Sir Roger's behavior in and authority over the church. Now, this is another kind of uh, criticism of the society, that we see that even though Sir Roger is doing, what he's doing is completely foolish and out of bounds. He does not have any authority over what goes on inside the church or what sermons are being given. He does not have any official authority over him. But since none of the other parishioners or members of the church are educated enough to understand the difference, they cannot even come up to complain. Now, this is also a critique of the society at large. These observations of Sir Roger's love of the high Anglican church in the countryside are essential to the author's original purpose for creating the character of Sir Roger to mock the seemingly backwards rural Tory or the Tory party, which he was also ridiculing in his essay. Now, this is a very important political aspect when we are analyzing Sir Roger the Coverley papers. Addison is ridiculing the Tory party, as I said, the Tory party. The Tory party was distinguished for its adherence, for its likeness or inclination towards in terms of high church and low church. But for Addison, principles rather than parties were more important. And one of the most important of these principles was toleration. Toleration, that you need to tolerate the various forms of religious affinities that exist within a particular society. And this is what he expresses in his essay, that this is what Addison believed in. He believed in toleration based upon the premise that Englishmen cannot be certain that the establishment as in the party that is at power, that was at power at that point of time, that also controlled the church, followed the rule of the divine right to rule, the God and the church uh, being the two sides of the coin, that has all the responsibilities of teaching a society, of instructing a society. This view was severely attacked by John Locke, as he thought that there are no such innate ideas, that this particular idea that only the establishment or the king or the church can teach you Christian doctrine. This was an idea that Locke attacked in many of his works that were published posthumously. And uh, and Addison was also a believer in this idea that it cannot be that only one particular political party or one particular group of people who are at the helm of power, who are the authority, only they can teach you the true Christian doctrine. That is not a view that Addison himself believed in. Addison was guided by the principle of latitudinarianism, uh, which was also the principle of John Locke, with their emphasis upon natural religion and reason, that is, rationale, the ability to rationalize or use logic, as they were the natural revelation given by direct communication from God. So you need reason and a rational mind in order to undertake direct communication of the God, and you do not need an intermediary in order to communicate with God, in order to be closer to God. And and as such, without this intermediary, it is warmth which Addison recommends as a proper to a Christian layman, to anybody who is not well versed with the Bible. Warmth is the essential emotion. He says that a state of temperance, sobriety, and justice without devotion is a cold, lifeless, insipid condition of virtue, and is rather to be styled philosophy than religion. Devotion opens the mind to great conceptions and fills it with more sublime ideas than any are to be met with in the most exalted science, and at the same time warms and agitates the soul more than sensual pleasure. So that is the role of devotion. He says that devotion cannot be cold, it must be full of warmth, it must be open ended, it cannot be hypocritical, and it cannot be closed interpretation. Uh, they are filled with more sublime ideas than any scientific research can give you, and they are more than, they do not make you cold, they do not make you passive. It agitates and warms your soul more than sensual pleasure. That is how religion should be, and not like what he presents at Sir Roger at church, where any human being, and more particularly an eccentric, humorous, ironical figure such as Sir Roger, has the authority to command what the church should be doing and should not be doing. So, as such, given the information that I have just shared, Addison then becomes a great critic, and social reformer who wished to bring about these changes in the life of the contemporary people through his contribution to the Spectator, which he founded, of course, in collaboration with his friend Richard Steele. In these periodical essays, he appears as a judicious critique of the manners and morals of the society. The main aim was to reform the society, and it was Addison's task to enliven morality with wit and to temper wit with morality. This was the task of Addison. He satirizes the vanity of the society, but he is very careful and mild in his satire. As I just said, that tolerance was the principle that Addison believed in. Unlike Pope or Dryden, he never attacks personally. The Spectator does not have any person attacks embedded in it. His mission is to correct the manners of the people and to improve their moral standards. Through the observations of Mr. Spectator, that is Addison and Steele, they attempted to call in a complicated and subtle change in the English society. The best of all characters in the Spectator Club for this function is, of course, Sir Roger de Coverley, the fictional stock type of a Tory character. That is what the character of Sir Roger is, a fictional stock type of a Tory squire. Criticizes the morals of the Tories. Sir Roger is portrayed in the antiquated country gentleman stereotype, the stereotype of an antiquated country gentleman, allowing and this allows the spectator to deride him as a nostalgic relic and depict the Tory party as outdated and out of fashion. The traditional attitude of Sir Roger that we see in the essays is paternalistic. When he deals with his tenants and servants, it is an example of a country trait or country quality that the authors appear to be sympathetic, and they commend it as an attitude that stood in sharp contrast to the new generation of hard-hearted landed aristocrats, the new generation that was to follow the Tories as Addison and Steele saw it. They were hard-hearted landed aristocrats, and they were nothing like Sir Roger, who shared a sympathetic relationship and a mutually dependent relationship with the servants. Unlike these new generation landowners, Sir Roger continued to observe traditional forms of country hospitality. Sir Roger's power in the household came from the fondness of his servants showed him due to his genuine concern for their well-being, as we see in Sir Roger at Home. In Sir Roger at Home, the purpose is twofold. That is, Addison focuses on what was good in the old order of things, and at the same time shows that such relations are things of the past. Sir Roger's ruling his household and the village with a genial yet somewhat autocratic in an autocratic way, it is a relic to be adored, but impossible to continue and cultivate in the present circumstances, in the present day England for Addison and Steele. And while the healthy living and paternalistic communal relations that Sir Roger demonstrates, they are portrayed with admiration. His dealings with the local church, that in the Assessor Roger at Church, is highly satirized. Mr. Spectator or Addison could not suppress a hint of amusement over Sir Roger's complete authority in the church, and writes that he keeps them in very good order and will suffer nobody to sleep in it beside himself. a quote that I have already showed to you. Sir Roger routinely causes disruptions, such as lengthening the verses of the psalms, etc., all the things that I have already discussed. They show his love for the high Anglican church in the countryside. And it seemingly mocks the backward rural Tory. During the decades following the writing of the Spectator, religious toleration gradually replaced strict conformity. When the Spectator was being written, or when Addison and Steele were writing in the time that followed, religious tolerance gradually replaced strict conformity, strict Puritanism. And like the rest of the Tory party, however, Sir Roger refused to be a part of this change. He resisted this change. Besides, he has vested interest in the church's authority as well. And in this way, Sir Roger represents both the positive and negative aspects of England's past. By his paternalistic charity, that was a quality of the past England, as such it is outdated now, and the mocked politeness, which is again a negative aspect of England's past, because it is unnecessary, because it is misplaced, and because it is unproductive and also hypocritic and very, very selfish if you consider the larger society inside the picture. And it must be remembered again and again, you must revise this fact that unlike other satirists of the age, such as Pope, then again Dryden, Swift, and Defoe, Daniel Defoe, of course, unlike all these people, Addison took an approach of tolerance and sustained irony. He did not ridicule any individual as such, but customs and rituals that were becoming backdated, that were becoming outdated and unproductive in contemporary England. That was the prime difference between what Addison's objective of writing satires were, and what the objective of all the other satirists were. Now we can understand that the essays were not written just for the sake of giving to us a character type of 18th century England, which it was, of course, in a way, but there was a purpose behind it. Addison had a very specific, or correctly speaking, Steele and Addison, they both had a very specific purpose behind writing of the Spectator, behind the periodical publications, behind the Coverley papers, behind the essays that they were writing, clearly mocking the 18th century stereotypical church-going character through Sir Roger de Coverley. Now, I will be sharing with you a document which very nicely discusses this character of Sir Roger being a stereotype of 18th century England. I would like you to go through it. It discusses the very things that we have just discussed in the past half an hour or so. However, if you do come across any problems, then please let me know. I will be more than happy to help you out with it. Thank you very much.